Welcome back to Responsive Web Design Techniques. I'm Rob, your tutor, and in this session we're going to look at building our page and building our navigation. So let's open Sublime Text. Now you can do this in Dreamweaver, you can do it in Notepad, you can do it whatever text editor you prefer. I like Sublime Text 3, but I'm going to be talking very generally, so don't feel like you have to use it. So let's open it up. And you can see we're greeted with a nice open blank page. The first thing I'm going to do is save this as our index.html. So I'm going to hit Command S because I'm on a Mac. And the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a root file. So let's open this up and call our responsive web design techniques _root. And what the root is going to allow you to do is link between files without having the problem of having them referenced elsewhere on your machine. And it's how you would set up a website if it were then hosted. So we're going to call this index.html and we're going to hit save. So the first thing we're going to want to do within our HTML file is declare the doc type. Now we're going to be using HTML5. I know Dreamweaver has a great way of setting up a template preset, but we're going to do it by hand. So let's declare the doc type HTML, and we're going to put in our HTML tags. And within those HTML tags, we're going to put our head tags. Notice that I'm indenting as I go, so I find it easier to manipulate my code later on. And then after the head tag goes the body tag. And also notice that I'm Command S, I'm hitting save every time I'm doing something. I find it's a great habit to get into, especially once we start previewing live in Chrome. You'll notice exactly why I'm doing it. We're going to put our meta tag in for the HTTP content type. And now what we're going to do is, even though we've got nothing here ready yet, we're going to go ahead and preview it. So I'm going to open up Finder. I'm going to go to my desktop, which is where I stored my RWDT root, and we're going to open that with Chrome. Now you can preview it in any browser. I love Chrome and I'm never ever going to switch from it. So this is what we have. Now you can't see anything on screen at the moment because we haven't done anything yet. But this is almost the equivalent of a live version of your site. You're previewing it locally, but it acts in the same way a website would. So the next thing we need to do is start declaring some style sheets. The first thing I like to do is pull in Eric Meyer's reset.css. So we're going to head back over to Sublime Text. Now you can get Eric Meyer's reset.css off just by Googling it, or you can grab it from the project files. And then make sure that it is in the same root file. So there you are, you can see my reset.css and it's carefully put in there. So again, I've hit Command S and I'm used to just hitting Command and Tab, or Alt and Tab if you're on a PC, and then just hitting Command R in Chrome. And this just refreshes it so that you know that every time you make a change to your CSS file or to your HTML file, you can tab quickly through, refresh it, see if it's done anything, make sure you've not broken it, or make sure it's taken the intended action, and then Alt Tab or Command Tab back to Sublime Text to make some more edits. The next thing we're going to want to do is declare our style sheet. So this is our main CSS style sheet. It's the thing we're going to style the majority of our website with. So let's stick that in the same way we put a reset in. But this won't do anything yet. So we're going to have to create a new file and call it stylesheet.css. So I'm going to hit Command N and we're going to hit Command S and we're going to call it stylesheet.css. Now the other thing I like to do in Sublime Text is hit View, Layout, and then 2 columns, and I find it's easier to look at them side by side. So as I'm editing style sheet, I don't have to keep tabbing between an HTML document and a CSS document to be able to make changes quickly. So just check that's working. I'm going to declare a body, background, FF4444. Hit Command S, head over, and there we go. That's a quick and easy way to troubleshoot a style sheet not loading. Just stick a body declaration in, and there you go. And while we're here, we're going to stick some generics in. So let's get a font family, and we're going to say Verdana, Geneva, Sans Serif. It's just to add a bit of styling from the get-go, and the other generic that I want to put in is a text decoration none. And that just means that we don't get those underlines on our anchor tags. So let's get cracking with building our navigation. Now let's just jump back and have a look at what we're building itself. You'll see that we've got a navigation bar, a logo, and our navigation list. Now this is made up of several components, namely our container. You can see that even at a full width website, it only spans a certain area. Now this is to make sure of several things. One, that the line length doesn't change too much. Two, you don't want to be catering for every size ever. This is a good way of making sure that your site displays perfectly at every size by making sure it doesn't get too big on a 27-inch iMac, for example. But you'll also notice that as we scale, it then adapts to the size. So we have our full width bar, we have our container, our logo, and our list. So let's start by building that. Let's jump into the body, and we're going to build remember to tab in, nav, class, nav bar, and close that tag. Always hitting Command S. It won't do anything in your styles or in your browser, but it's good practice, as I said. So we're going to put our nav hold in. So this is our container. Again, we're going to tab in. So this is div, class, nav, hold, and then close that. Now let's put the logo in. So this is just a simple anchor tag, href hash, so that it acts like an ink. Class equals nav logo, and then my awesome logo. Now notice that I'm giving these semantic markup names, so nav logo, nav hold, nav bar. They're all very descriptive. It's not nav and then nav div and then nav div a. You'll see instances where I do use that, but it's better to be more specific so that you can style much more easily later on, and we'll talk about that later when we get to the forms, but it's a good thing to get into practice with. And the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to put in the list. So we're going to say ul class nav list. Later on we're going to need to have the ID of nav, so let's add that in now and close that tag. And then we're going to add in our sections. So we had about me, cat pictures, contact, and lorem ipsum. So I'm going to put them in now. And you can see that each of the anchor tags has the ID of what we're looking for. So about me has the hash about me. And what we're going to do now is, now we've actually made some changes to our body, we're going to hit Command S, and we're going to head back over to our file and refresh it. And you can see we've got my awesome logo, about me, cat pictures, contact, and lorem ipsum. But that doesn't look anything like that. So what we're going to be doing now is a bit of styling. So let's jump back over to here and into our CSS. And we're going to put our first section in. It's easy to have a CSS file that becomes 2,000 or 3,000 lines long and difficult to then manage it if early down the line you don't add your sections in. So these are just done by comments, and this is a personal preference, but I find it easier to work with when you're looking at semantically clean markup. So let's add in a comment and say width setting. So this is anything that we're going to be specifying a general width with. So we're going to say nav hold. And what we want this to do is to be a specific width of, say, 95%, so that at any size, it is always 95% of its container, unless that would make it bigger than a certain size. So to do that, we'll do a max width. So let's set a width of 95%. Let's set a max width of 1,000 pixels. And let's set a margin of 0 and auto, and that's just to center it. And if we come back across, you'll see that immediately it's slightly centered in the sense that this is the start of our 1,000 pixels, and probably about here is the end of it. And just to check that that works, there you go. You can see it's ever so slightly coming in a bit, and that's because it's a percentage. 95% is 2.5% either side, so you'll see that 2.5% of the width getting smaller. And that's a really easy way to make sure that it works on every size. So let's go back to our style sheet and let's do a bit more styling. So let's put in a navigation section, and we're going to specify nav bar. Now this is something we do want to be 100% width. So we're going to say width 100% and then background 222. That's a nice dark grey. And there you go. You can see that that is now 100% width and it hasn't affected our container. Later on we'll be specifying other selectors for nav hold and these widths, so we're not going to access nav hold again from here. Instead we're going to set a second declaration of nav hold, and we're just going to set overflow hidden because later on we're going to be doing some floats inside there and we don't want it to start messing up because we haven't set our overflows. So let's address our logo. Now we want to float this on the left hand side, so we're going to say nav logo float left, display block, padding 20 pixels, 10 pixels, color F9, 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 and that's off-white. It's not quite white, but it's just close enough that it's not straining your eyes, and it's just one of those web design techniques that you don't ever use complete black and you don't ever use complete white. It's a preference, but I like it. And we want it nice and bold, so we're going to say font weight 600 and head over, and there we go. You can see I'm constantly command saving or command S and then refreshing command R. And there you go, you can see it's exactly the same as what we have here. So now we're going to want to style our list. So let's come in and we're going to say nav list float right. And again, I won't do it all the time, but just while we're getting into the flow of things, command S, command R, and we can see our list is floated to the right. And this is probably the best time to show you that full width in action. So here's the edge of our 1000 pixels, and then as you drag it in, you see it scrolls with the page, or rather resizes with the page. So let's jump back across, and here is where we're going to use our nested selectors. So we're going to say nav list li, because we only know that in our nav there's only one nested level of LIs that we're affecting, and this is always going to be the same thing. We're unlikely to use this styling again, so it's not such an issue that we're using an LI rather than a class name. So we're going to say that to float left, and again come back across, see what that does, and now we've got them in a line, and they're a bit blue and a bit difficult to see and not centered. So let's tackle the anchors themselves. Say nav list lia. Again, because we're only going to be affecting a single A within that LI, given this example. If it was a bit trickier or a bit more complex, maybe there were a couple of spans inside the A's, we'd be looking at class names. But because there aren't, we don't have to worry about that. So we're going to say display block, padding 20 pixels, 10 pixels, and the color F9, F9, F9. Come across, and there we go. As you can see, the only change there is I've got a capital I on the demo. And that's basically it. It sounds really, really simple, but in this sense, this is responsive. As you scroll, your navigation gets smaller. It doesn't break. Granted, when you get to the point where the logo and the nav overlap, it just drops down. But because we're using percentages and not fixed widths, it won't ever break the page. You shouldn't ever get a scroll bar that's a horizontal scroll bar. So there you go, course done. I'm completely joking, of course, because what we're going to do next week is we're going to sort this out. But in the simplest sense of the word, our site is already responsive. And I think that a lot of people are scared of the word responsive. So what I'm trying to do here is break down those barriers. So that was it. Really easy stuff. We're just tackling building with percentages today, and we've built out our document and our nav bar. So next session we'll look at the media queries and how they affect different sizes. We'll do a little bit of basics surrounding media queries themselves. The session after that we'll look at the jQuery that makes the menu drop down and drop up again, and after that we will continue with our image grid and then our forms. So I'll see you guys next session.